Hi everybody, thanks for tuning in today. My name is Rick, and if you're new to the channel, please check out my Crosstrek playlist, as well as some videos on my 911 and my 2020 Jeep. The main thing we're going to talk about in today's video is how the Crosstrek did on my recent 3,300 mile round trip out to Lincoln, Illinois. It's my son's freshman year of college, and I had to drive him out there. We didn't keep the car out there this semester, so I got to drive it back and forth. It's about 1,600 miles one way. And if you're new to the channel, I live in Tucson, Arizona, so quite a trek. We went through New Mexico, a little bit of Texas, a little bit of Oklahoma, and then into Kansas, across Missouri, and then into Illinois. We spent about a day and a half in Kansas, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. I also wanted to talk about what I think is the best design change in the 2021 Crosstrek. Unfortunately, I have not been able to drive it yet, and I'm hoping to do that in the next month or so when I take my wife's WRX in for service. Anyway, if any of that stuff interests you, stick around. We're going to talk about those things. Hope everyone's doing well, and if you have any questions or comments, as usual, you can leave those below, or you can email me, and you'll find that in the description. Thanks guys, let's get started. How did the Crosstrek do over this 3,300 mile round trip? Well, first and foremost, let's talk about gas mileage. If you guys are familiar with Subaru and you've had them for years, you probably know that the computer stated gas mileage is usually between 1 and 3 miles per gallon less than what it actually turns out to be when you calculate it. And I'd say we average between 30 and 31 per the computer, so figure 27 to 29-ish with an average speed of about 70 miles per hour. Most of Arizona is 75 miles per hour on the freeway. When you get into New Mexico, there's a little bit of 75, but most of it's 70, and the same with Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, etc. So overall, pretty happy with that, considering gas prices are pretty low right now. I believe, other than Illinois, everything was around $2 a gallon or a little bit less. This is the first time that I've spent any measurable time in the passenger seat. My son did most of the driving on the way out, so that was kind of nice. I will say that I found the passenger seat initially a little bit uncomfortable, just kind of firm and really not broken in yet. For the most part, I spent all the time in the driver's seat and really not taking passengers on a regular basis, so that seat really wasn't broken in. After a little while, I kind of got used to it. Once I got it in a good position, it wasn't bad. It wasn't like it was miserable, but I just noticed it was not as comfortable as the driver's seat. And once I got over there and was driving, I was very comfortable. So I know a lot of you don't care for the seats in the Crosstrek, but even though it doesn't have lumbar support adjustment, at least on the 18, it was totally fine. No problems at all as far as long-term travel. I actually did a 12-hour day and I think a little over 13 hours coming home. And I got out of the car when I got home and my back wasn't stiff, my legs didn't hurt, none of that stuff. So it was actually pretty comfortable. Really the only complaint I will say is really not the car's fault, and that is the noise level of the BFGs at certain speeds. Obviously when you put all-terrain tires on your car, it's going to be louder, and it's something that I've talked about in a lot of videos over the years. But if you're not someone that can tolerate noise very well, but you still want an all-terrain tire, I would consider looking elsewhere. Even though all the reviews that I read previous to buying the BFGs said they were pretty quiet, I would disagree with that. I think they're pretty loud, actually. And from a previous video a long time ago, I think it was about 4 decibels louder at the same speed compared to stock. And obviously, the faster you go, the more noise you're going to get. Surprisingly, road noise-wise, the Jeep is actually quieter than the Crosstrek. So that was really the only thing I would complain about as far as all that time in the car, that the noise from the tires kind of wears on you a little bit. Obviously, you can turn up the sound of the stereo and that works, but if you're talking on the phone or doing anything like that, you do have to talk pretty loud and turn the volume up to hear people through Bluetooth. The only other issue that we had on this trip, other than the massive amount of bugs, was we lost another fog light cover. This is actually the third one that's flown off of my car. The first one I take credit for because I was off-road. I'm pretty sure I bumped the front end, which kind of popped one of the clips, and I lost it on the way back. That was probably 2.5, 3 years ago when I first got the car. My son went up to Phoenix about 2.5, 3 months ago and lost one on the way up there. That was following me replacing the fog lights with the diode dynamic fog lights. And the weird thing is we had already been up to Phoenix to pick up the Jeep. So we'd already been on the freeway at speed, and I was very careful about putting them on correctly. So again, not really sure why that one flew off, but that was 2 on the driver's side. And then on this trip, again, no off-roading previous, and we lost the passenger side this time, somewhere between here and Kansas. So they're not super expensive. I think that's like 28 bucks, but when you throw in shipping, you're looking at about 40. So it's a little bit frustrating. And that kind of leads me into what I think is the best design change with the 2021. Obviously, I love the fact that they added 30 horsepower and 30 torque to the motor, put the 2.5 liter in there. But if you look at the front end of the 2021 Crosstrek, you'll see that the fog light cover is more integrated into the overall design of the front. So I'm hoping that they don't fly off as often. And I know I've heard from a number of you, at least a handful, who have had similar issues with fog light covers coming off. So if you have had that, let me know below. I'd just like to get a better feel of how many people have had this problem. I have to say that honestly, I'm not a huge fan of the front design of the new Crosstrek. It might grow on me over time, but as of now, I'm not a huge fan, other than the fact that they changed that fog light cover integration. So overall, the Crosstrek did great on this trip. Comfort-wise, gas mileage-wise, we were able to get all of my son's stuff in the back of the car, including all my camera gear and things of that nature. When there's only 2 people in the car, it's pretty easy to get everything in there. When you start getting into room problems, when you have 3 people and you can only put 1 seat down or whatever, we've talked about that in the past. I really enjoyed the trip, and like I mentioned, I was very fresh when I got done all the days of driving, and it was nice to be a passenger for a change. Along the way, we stopped and tried to find silly things along the roadside, and we're pretty successful here and there, and here's some of those shots. But there's a really cool app that we use, and I can link that below too if you're traveling. It's kind of fun to stop and just take selfies with all this silly stuff. As I mentioned in the opening, we stopped in Kansas and we spent about a day and a half. For those of you who don't know me personally, I was actually adopted as a baby. And about 6 months ago, I did some DNA testing with 23andMe and as well as Ancestry.com, and was able to find out who my birth mother is, my birth father, and get some photos of those folks. I have not heard back from my birth mother at this point, but I was able to meet a first cousin on my birth mother's side on this trip, and it was really fun. We had been communicating a lot on Facebook, and she's just a crack up. We had a good time meeting her. And we also were able to meet my birth father for the first time, as well as half brother and sister. Absolutely incredible experience. For those of you who are adopted and have experienced anything like this, you know what I'm talking about. If you are adopted and you've not tried to find your family and you need some help, hit me up below. I can tell you the process I went through. I highly recommend it. In the past, I had kind of a negative experience with my birth mother, finding her about 23 years ago, not knowing her name or anything about her, but through the court system, and was denied contact then. She still is not communicating, which is okay, I get it. But this experience with my birth father and my siblings and all that, and meeting an amazing amount of family, was absolutely awesome. And I'm considering doing an adoption video, just to try to help some other folks out. So stay tuned for that. That may happen. But otherwise, that's what we did in Kansas. So we spent a day and a half in Kansas, and truly incredible experience. From there, we did the 6.5 hours on to Lincoln, Illinois, where we dropped off my son. So all in all, an amazing trip. Just spending time with him, the experience in Kansas, you know, the emotional stuff, dropping him off at school, and then spending the 2 really long days coming home. The last thing I wanted to talk about was comparing the Crosstrek and the Jeep as far as highway travel and which one I think is a little bit better for long distance. My wife and I just did a total of about 600 miles round trip up to Flagstaff and back. Obviously, it's not a 3,300 mile trip, so it's really not apples to apples comparison, but doing that gave us an idea of what it's like to travel in the Jeep. And overall, I have to say it was actually a great experience, especially when I remember back to my 2005 Rubicon. And that wasn't a terrible experience, but it wasn't great. And it was certainly nothing that I would want to do longer than about the trip to Flagstaff and back. Whereas with the 2020 Jeep, actually has less road noise than the Crosstrek as far as tire noise goes. There is a little bit more air noise with the mirrors and the fact that you're putting a brick through the air, essentially. But all in all, it was actually a nice experience. There is that little bit of on-center vagueness in the steering that I've mentioned in previous videos. It's not a shimmy, it's not the previous 2018 issues with steering, and it's not pulling to the left or right. It's just that little bit of vague where you have that little bit of play. And the Jeep is also affected more by wind, again, given the shape. So those couple things lead me to lean towards the Crosstrek as far as long distance travel goes, given the fact that the Crosstrek actually has, you know, just better steering in general, a little more sporty to drive. I wouldn't say it's more comfortable. I think the Jeep honestly is a little bit more comfortable as far as travel goes, the seats and the driving position, etc. But because of those couple little flaws with the Jeep, I would lean towards the Crosstrek as far as long distance travel. Anything over, I'd say about 8 to 10 hours, I would go with the Crosstrek. Anyway, guys, that's really about it. I don't have anything else crazy. If you guys have suggestions for videos or you have questions or comments, like I mentioned, email or drop that below. And I hope everyone's doing well. Summer's almost over. It's crazy here in the States anyway. So take care, guys. Thanks for watching, and we will see you soon.